You mentioned GMOs and the GMO debate.
Yep.
But it brings up a topic because we talked about fish, and then we talked about what you have to be careful with fish is actually the mercury and the toxicity.
Right, that's right.
Toxicity is such a big problem, and it goes without saying, but it needs to be addressed.
That's correct.
Toxicity is such a big problem. Right now, there's 4 billion prescription drugs are ingested in the United States. There's 70,000 chemicals are used commercially. 3,000 plus chemicals are added to our food supply.
Mm-hmm.
You think about that, there's 10,000 chemicals are used in food processing and preserving and storage alone.
Yeah.
The average person is exposing themselves to countless chemicals, and that's why we say minimizing toxins is one of our core beliefs or core essentials, because you can't actually get rid of all toxins. And there's 5, I would say, that you and I call the toxic top 5. And I want to go through that because I really believe that this is essential for this person to be well. You know how many times that you and I test somebody and we find out that they have heavy metal exposure, which is actually causing their health problems.
That's right.
They're actually eating fairly well, but it's because of exposure when
right.
they're early on in life, or what their mom or dad exposed themselves to, which passed down through cord blood.
That's right.
Most people don't realize this. There's a study of infant cord blood, and they found 287 chemicals in infant cord blood. Where in the world did that come from? Well, that came from mom passing it down.
That's right.
And so understanding that what some of we have is bioaccumulated from the previous generation, and then what do we do about that? So the toxic top 5, and so we talk about heavy metals being one of them. Where do heavy metals come from?
Well, they shouldn't be coming from any of our food sources or our skin products, but they do because they've been put in there or ended up waste products getting in there. But we need to keep in mind that you can't just trust everything without reading the labels and understanding the manufacturers and their commitments to wellness. What you put on your skin or under your arms is in your bloodstream in about 2 minutes, okay? And so that's one source. Cooking, aluminum, different utensils we cook on. No, not just one week you use it. No, not just once a year, but ongoing our body collects these things. Same way with foods. Not all foods are safe just because they have a brand on them that we've trusted for years. We have to read those labels. And over time, here's the thing about metals that's so scary. They don't leave easy.
That's right.
They stick. And unless we chelate, either orally or intravenously or some way, they will remain for decades and decades and decades. The body just has a very difficult time getting rid of those metals. And some of them are so dangerous, like mercury, naming that's the most toxic metal known to man, second only to plutonium. It doesn't take hardly any of it to mess up the nervous system of the body or to cause issues. We can have allergies. I've had patients who have had allergies, and it was solely because of mercury toxicity. But for decades, they've been treated by an allergy specialist, and they were getting almost nowhere with the symptom picture because they hadn't removed the cause, which was actually mercury causing confusion in the system.
That's right. You know, how many people that I'm meeting with that I test that have mercury toxicity, aluminum toxicity, many times in combination.
That's true.
You mentioned amalgam fillings as one of them, the annual flu shot being another one for mercury, having that thimerosal preservative. Not just the annual flu shot, we also still see mercury or thimerosal in some of the childhood vaccinations, which they're getting more of those now than they ever have in the history of the human species. And so aluminum, I mean, we live in the aluminum era.
Yes.
We're getting aluminum from everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many sources of aluminum, not just from cans, because that's easy, to the canned foods, but where else are we getting this aluminum from? Well, we're getting it from sometimes our pots and pans. There's other sources that you've mentioned before that they're coming from.
Right. Well, antiperspirants are one of them for sure, because there's aluminum in almost all antiperspirants that go under our arms right next to the lymph nodes. And people use those every day, sometimes more than once a day. I've seen people who carry them in their purse and apply them more than once a day.
Well, just recently, I had a patient who was very aluminum toxic. It came back in the analysis. And sure enough, we were talking through all the different sources of aluminum, and he said, it's the antiperspirant. I said, well, why do you think that? He said, well, I sweat profusely, and so he says, I use it constantly. He says, then I go to the gym in the middle of the day, and so I come back and I put it back on.
Apply it again.
And so so he said, what's your advice? And part of my advice was, the obvious, stop doing that.
Yeah, of course.
Stop doing that. But there's antiperspirant, then there's deodorant. Deodorant doesn't necessarily have that, but we're made to sweat.
That's
Remember,
right.
the aluminum is there to clog the ducts so that
That's
we
right.
don't actually sweat.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not detoxing out, because that's what sweat is,
Yeah.
it's staying in your body. And we wonder why women end up with nodules right in that individual area.
Right.
Well, that's part of the reason. You're blocking up those ducts. Those cells start to come together, and whether that's ductal carcinoma in situ, which is not cancerous, it can turn into problems though.
Yes.
And so the challenge there is that we still do chemo and radiation for like ductal carcinoma in situ,
Yes.
which is not actually
Right.
cancer. That's a separate side topic. But the other topic is, why are we continuing to do that?
Mm-hmm.
We pretend like public health is about the greater good and about protecting those who can't protect themselves. Yet here we are still having chemicals in our factory, in our environment, that are cancer causing.
Right.
And we know they are.
Right. Well, again, I always say, don't check your brain at the door when you go to any health practitioner. Not even here at Max Living. We want you to think. We want you to think. We want you to truly be fully persuaded with this information. And when somebody's trying to stop you from sweating, if you'll think for just a minute, you're interfering with the body's natural processes, and that's never a good idea, okay? Especially not prolonged. But, it's inconvenient. If I raise my arms and it looks wet, I'm embarrassed. What if I stink? Well, we've talked about this before. You shouldn't stink anyway from sweat. It's the toxins in your body that are causing you to smell when you sweat anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a sign. If you have stinky sweat,
Yeah.
or stinky farts.
That's right.
You say flatulence, but let's just call it what it is. That's a problem. How about tap water? So we're talking about the toxic top 5 right now. Tap water. Why is tap water toxic?
Well, let me lay this foundation. Unless it's been updated in the last couple of months, the law for tap water, the statute for tap water is it has to be, and for bottled water, it has to be equal to the tap water in the city which it sold. What I'm trying to say, if you even buy bottled water, the only statute is it has to be equal to the tap water in the city which it sold to be lawful. That's a problem in itself. So you have to read the label again, where you're getting your water. City water has been treated with several chemicals to stop some of the things that we're putting in the water. So here we go again with this back and forth, rob Peter to pay Paul. We shouldn't have to treat our water if it was just clean water, H2O. But when you have all kinds of bacteria and chemicals and even pharmaceuticals, which are in there from being put in the toilet, you can't just send that to the house. Well, I suppose you could. Wouldn't be a good idea. But you have to filter it, treat it, do something to try to destroy the carcinogens that are in there. It's much like when people ask me, well, what about decaf coffee if you don't want me to have caffeine? Same thing. If they don't decaffeinate with water, which is Swiss water decaffeination, you're just getting another chemical in exchange for a chemical. And so this is primarily what's wrong with tap water. We're just exchanging one chemical for another, and then they're telling us that, well, if you don't get that much chlorine, it's not that bad. If you only get that much of this, that, or the other chemical, it's not that bad. The problem is, again, accumulation, and what they don't speak to is the person. Not everybody is in the same state of health that's consuming this. Some people's bodies are a little more vital and can probably fight these toxins a little better, but some people do not have that luxury. Their bodies are dumbed down enough that they cannot afford those invasions at all.
Well, our body is designed to process a certain amount of toxicity, just in nature. It's meant to process the bad berry or the snake bite or whatever it is that our body can handle. But we're getting these toxins from everywhere.
Yep.
And tap water. So we had our water tested. We're moving into a new house. We test our water in order to know exactly what we're trying to filter out.
Right.
And so I think that's a good idea, by the way, is to know exactly what you're trying to filter out based on your area. You might have higher fluoride, you might have higher chlorine, you might have higher even drugs in your water system. How do drugs end up in our water system? Well, either those who are flushing their drugs down the toilet, or they're urinating them out, because that's what we do with toxins, which drugs are toxic. And then they end up in our water system. Well, the molecules are so tiny, they're not getting filtered out in the wasteway. And so it's getting recycled into our water system. Most people don't know that antidepressants are in our water system.
That's right.
Not that they put them in there intentionally.
Right.
Just like birth control, it's not that I believe they put them in there intentionally, yet it's still in there because, again, it's being filtered out and into our water systems.
Right. That's correct.
And so just knowing that that's what your tap water is coming from. So it's very simple to change this. Is you can do at the counter, you can do like a reverse osmosis filter at the counter. Bring in somebody to drill a hole there and just buy it. It's like $250 to do it, and then you have water for the lifespan of that reverse osmosis filter.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
A little spigot at the counter is as easy as that. Now, if you do reverse osmosis, do know that it's filtering out your minerals. And so you may desire to supplement with the trace minerals or put a pinch of Himalayan sea salt in your water just to get the minerals. But we really shouldn't be getting just minerals from our water anyway. That really should come from food.
That's right.
Now, our trace minerals, so I don't want to go too much on that topic, but trace minerals should be coming from our food, which is rich in fruits and vegetables.
Right. That's correct. Yeah.
How about cookware? So we're talking about the toxic top 5 right now, and we mentioned heavy metals. We talked about tap water. How about cookware? Why is cookware on the toxic top 5 now?
Well, again, everybody's always reinventing this. And again, you have to do your research to make sure that the new invention is better than the old invention. It may be, it may not be. So you got to do a little bit of research. But the main reason with cookware is that when you apply heat to something, what might have been safe isn't safe after heat is applied to it. This is even true with the amalgam fillings we talked about. When people are drinking hot coffee, which often people like hot drinks, it affects the amalgam to even leak or to seep more of this mercury out into the system. So I think the main thing with cookware is when heat's being applied to it, it changes the picture quite a bit. And again, people could say, well, I don't use it that often. It's just once in a while. Or my grandma used it and she was fine, whatever we want to say. But we have this degradation because we're exposed to more things more often in more ways than we've ever been before. When grandma was using these things, first of all, back in the 40s and the 50s, there was a lot more cast iron than aluminum, back then, but which is not quite as dangerous to us. But as we've moved forward with 800,000 man-made chemicals and them coming at us from all sides, our ability to tolerate these invasions is getting less and less. So that's the reason, one of the reasons.
Teflon being the biggest invader.
Yeah.
And it's and within Teflon, there's the chemical PFOA, which is C8, and that's what they consider a forever chemical.
Yeah.
Which means that once it's in your system or once it's in the environment, it doesn't go away. And so understanding that Teflon, so there's a movie called Dark Waters, and I highly recommend it. It's like an Aaron Brockovich type movie exposing the water and the industry pollution, and the same deal happened with DuPont and this Teflon cookware. And so they hit it. They understood how bad it was for public health. It was killing the animals. Animals were growing weird masses. The offspring were very brittle, weak, not developing well. And they came in and found, oh, wow, it's this DuPont plant right over here that's really dumping into the water system. It's getting into everyone's water system. And again, this is one of the reasons why, our tap water is toxic, but so is Teflon cookware.
Right.
In fact, when you funnel the fumes, they've done a study, it's called the Canary study, where they funnel the fumes of Teflon into a bird cage. Well, the birds all died, and that was just from the fumes. And so think about how this is getting into our food and cooking on it. And it's not just because DuPont put it in the water system. Now we have it in the carpet. So Teflon in the carpet.
Right.
We have it in many different sources, and it's very, very toxic to us. So what are some of the better cookware? Well, you mentioned cast iron would be a good one. What's another one?
Well, glass.
Glass is also a good one.
Stainless steel.
Stainless steel is what we do and what we prefer. Cast iron can be good for so many different things, but people say, well, that's where you're getting your iron. It's good for you to get your iron. It's not really where you want your source of iron to come from.
No, it's not.
And so the reality is, don't trust the next, non-stick coating thing that comes out there, because again, you're only 1 decade away from a research study showing, hey, that is also very dangerous.
Right.
We saw this with BPA and the plastics.
Right.
They came out with BPS, said, oh, it's just a lateral move, it's BPS, it's better. It's non-toxic, it's great. Then it comes out and showing BPS is actually worse. And so
Wonderful.
what are we going to do? So it's the next green cookware. I'm always very hesitant when it comes to the next green cookware, whatever that green
Right.
cookware might
Right.
be.
Right.
Go with more trusted sources over time, stainless steel being one of them and cast iron being another.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So we've gone through heavy metals, tap water, Teflon cookware, and now household products. So why household products? What are we talking about when we say household products?
Well, these are toilet bowl cleaners, glass cleaners, floor cleaners, dish liquids, things you put your hands in. I mean, all of the above. Again, it sounds overwhelming and picky, but the truth is, it's the constant exposure over time that begins to collect up. In fact, there are studies that show that being in the home with these types of cleaners is more toxic than being outside. And especially for people who, just think of the people who work in the cleaning business and then come home as well, how much more exposure they have. And they may be even using industrial type cleaners if they're doing house cleaning for a living.
I'll give an example. DEA. DEA. It's a chemical that you can find in soaps and lotions, bath water. It's really the bubbling property. This is the chemical that causes things to bubble up. And they found DEA was found to cause cancer in animal studies. And yet here it is, still on the market as an example.
Right.
So
right.
DEA, propylene glycol, it's an ingredient in antifreeze. And again, that's another one that you'll find in lotions. You'll find that in toothpaste many times.
Yes.
And SLS being another one. But they found that this caused kidney damage. It caused certain types of cancers. It caused oxidation of the arteries, and so leading to things like heart disease. And yet here it is still in, and you have to be careful about these things.
Right.
It's not like these things are banned, although some of these chemicals are banned in other countries like Europe, yet they're still allowed here in the United States because of the lobbying and, again, a whole nother topic.
Right.
But the point is that you need to be very intentional, because what goes in your body all becomes your body.
Yes.
What goes on your skin gets into your body.
Yes, it does.
Most people don't realize that. Perfumes on the skin, cosmetics on the skin, that becomes part of your body, gets in the bloodstream.
Yeah.
Just like a nicotine patch, you can put that on your arm and influence your hormones.
Yes, you can.
Well, in the same way that you put a nicotine patch, or maybe it's something like the yam creams or whatever that is, that influences hormones.
That's right.
What goes on your skin, because your skin is an organ that influences your body on the inside. And so this isn't just for ladies, but ladies because of cosmetics and makeups ends up becoming a big offender. So greening your, let's say just greening your cosmetics and greening your, and making sure you have green products for your household is really important. EWG.org is a good reference for all this.
Yes, it is.
Where someone could get on there and type in a cosmetic as an example, and it grades them. And you can find better options at EWG.org.
Yes, and I want people to know too that you say, well, that's all great, I believe you guys, but boy, this is going to be expensive. Well, first of all, if it's really not. If you do the true math, it's not expensive. Many of these better cleaners, especially the concentrated ones, are no more expensive than the regular ones you're buying. But even if that wasn't the case, what's the real expense? 66% of the bankruptcies filed are filed because of health problems. So you want to talk about expensive. Once you have disease, you could be a millionaire, and you won't be a millionaire long if you have disease.
That's right.
And so that's the real expense that we're going to face if we don't prioritize a bit and think about what we're doing. Look, we have all kinds of luxuries in America, and we've become accustomed to them, whether it's cable TV, whether it's our expensive cell phones. I've got a friend of mine, I think he spent $680 just on the phone. Just the phone. I mean, I can buy a really nice television for $680. I mean, a really nice HD television, and I've got something in my pocket. And yet,
it's more than that now. Just so you know, they're up to like $1,200 to $1,500 for iPhones.
I can imagine. But yet, even right here at the clinic, you can go through an entire rejuvenation program with us for about $1,800, and you're like, well, I can't handle that. Well, if you've got something in your pocket that's $1,200, I mean, come on. I mean, help me out.
Putting out EMFs all the time.
Help me out here. Help me out. So I just want us to really think a minute what the priorities really are. If I can't laugh and I can't run with my children and I can't keep a thought, if I can't remember where I put my keys, then all these luxuries aren't going to mean much to us.
Yeah. And that really brings me to the last one. When it comes to the toxic top five, medications being the number one offender.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, the average person now fills 12 prescriptions every single year. We act like these things are non-harmful. You can get them at the counter. You can get them at even gas stations now. You can get the Tylenol or whatever it is. Whereas, what's really interesting is that the early on in the development of drugs, things like aspirin, and which was the biggest one early on, but also acetaminophen, they said acetaminophen was not safe for human consumption, and now here it is in Tylenol, Dayquil, NyQuil, all these different, and you can get them over the counter.
Right.
And the reason why it's public enemy number one when it comes to toxicity is because of how much we're doing it.
Right.
There's 118 million antidepressants prescribed in 2005 alone. 118 million antidepressants. And so you think about this, what changes chemistry is a chemical in the body.
Right.
And our body has to filter this out. So liver, gallbladder, kidneys, lymph system, these are all organs of detoxification on some level.
That's correct.
Has to filter these things and try to get rid of them.
Right.
And again, our toxic burden continues to go up over time.
Yes, it does. And I think that what is interesting is when you look at most drugs, there's at least 5 side effects, if not more. And some of the side effects, even though the way they advertise them to us is we've got butterflies in the background and birds and sweet music and whatever to try to distract from the fact that one of the side effects could be blindness or kidney failure or death or whatever. But it's interesting how we want to just kind of put blinders on and go ahead and swallow that. Okay, it's just scary, that we don't understand that many of the things we're consuming are causing us more problems than what's really going on. And it all comes down to a lack of knowledge. Like we started, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Knowledge is an important thing to have, but you got to make sure you know where the source is coming from. I want to read one last scripture as we wrap up today. Proverbs 15:10. This is again out of the Amplified. There is severe discipline for him who forsakes God's way. Now this God's way, it applies to way more than just the fact that we go to church and pay our tithes or say prayers. Okay, those are all good things. God's way. God wants to be involved in everything that we do. He is the chief. He knows what's going on. And he who hates reproof or correction, that's another word for correction. If you hate correction, which what we've done today is trying to guide you, trying to bring correction, trying to help you. He who hates correction will die physically, morally, and spiritually. That's the spirit, soul, and body. When you hate correction, you're going to die in all 3 of those areas. And friends, we're seeing a lot of that today because our world has continued to move in hatred towards God's way. I'm telling you, there's severe discipline when we do that.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap this up. I know there's a lot of people who right now benefit from this message, but there's a lot of people out there who have never heard this message or just need to hear it in this time. So I think a great way to, maybe share this message, subscribe so you get the messages when the next time we post something, and then share this message with somebody. With the digital age, it's so easy just to share this message. So I know I'm sending this to my pastor and my friends and the people who I know need to hear this right now. And the reality is that there's so many people sick, suffering, and also dying early because of lack of knowledge and lack of understanding, and then lack of application of it. So let's be fair here.
Absolutely.
So share, hey, listen, share this message. Make sure you let's subscribe, get the information to you. And then the other thing is that start taking action on this information.
Yes.
It's not about knowledge, it's about taking action. Information doesn't save lives, it's taking action. And there's somebody in your life who needs to see you step up to really be congruent in what you believe.
Right.
And hey, let's change the family dynamic here when it comes to what Sunday dinner looks like, what Christmas dinner looks like.
Right.
And when it comes together for Thanksgiving, let's change that dynamic and be leaders when it comes to this.
Yeah, faith without works is dead. And that's true. We have to make application. Let's have a word of prayer before we close out today, okay? God, we're thankful for your word. We ask you to help us with our understanding. We thank you that you love us and you want good things for us. Help us to not be deceived. Help us to put you at the top and to not worship idols. And we just thank you, God, that You know all things. We do not know all things, but you can remove the blinders from our eyes and you can help us to walk in the way of the right. And we know we'll benefit because you said that, be not deceived, I shall not be mocked. Whatsoever any man soweth, that will he reap. Help us to sow health to our bodies, and we know we'll reap it. Amen.
Amen. This is Dr. Nick Wilson. This is the Ask Dr. Wilson show. Hey, this has been a fun episode, and I hope you enjoyed this. Again, you can get on facebook.com/AskDrWilson. Get on Instagram, follow us there. You can also find us on YouTube, Dr. Nick Wilson on YouTube. Hey, subscribe to those pages and get the information directly to you when you do so. Rate the show if you're listening on the podcast. Again, it's Ask Dr. Wilson. Hey, have a great day. Make it a great rest of your life, and we will see you next time.